Yo, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy Zevi here, back at it again to drop another part for the amazing series of What If Deku was Meruem's reincarnation. Now, the last part, it got a lot of support and love from you guys, so I'm bringing you guys the very next part the very next day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, but before I do get started, I just have a couple of things to say. Number one, it was actually brought to my attention that apparently Meruem was born with Nen, so I am going to be retconning the little, oh, he doesn't use Nen, but this part probably won't include any usage of Nen, but the very next couple of parts will, so, be out on the lookout for that. And if you haven't subscribed to the group channel, the Akatsuki, down below, link in the description. It is me, Rogex, Izukage, Phoenix Sanin, as well as check out my link of my Discord server down below. Let me know if you guys join down below in the comments, and just check out my boy Dank God. He made the amazing thumbnail. With that being said, I don't want to waste you guys' time anymore, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so we start the story off right after Nezu and Deku finished talking that day. See, on the last part, we basically had left off with Deku and Nezu having a little bit of a conversation about just hero society and just humans as a whole. Now, after all of that had basically happened, Deku would essentially proceed to, well, just pretty much go home, and he would just rest up. This is when I'm now going to start covering the 10 months of training that Deku is going to be having. During the 10 months, Deku pretty much just meditates throughout most of it and hangs out with Nezu every other, couple days that he can. Anytime Nezu is free, Deku would basically go over to UA and just play shogi with him. This would actually lead to Nezu getting way smarter than his original version, and this would lead to Deku and Nezu growing a little bit of a closer bond. Deku and Nezu would end up enjoying a whole lot of tea, and Deku's hair would get really soft like Nezu, just because I don't know if you guys remember that, but Nezu was like, yeah, my fur's really soft. But just that stuff. And in terms of All Might, instead of picking a successor during this time, All Might would have spent his time recovering from his organ surgery. If you guys don't remember, Deku would pretty much mention that to All Might, told him, why doesn't he just replace his respiratory system instead of trying to fix it? I mean, it's already destroyed. Why try to fix something that's broken when you can just use a new one, They would have done the surgery and it would have been a huge success. The most amazing doctors in the world would have been working on him, of course. And, that obviously contributed to the reason as to why, it was all good. That being said, Deku just kind of hung out with Nezu a couple of times, and Nezu and Deku ended up becoming sort of best friends, I guess you could say. It's the weirdest thing ever. What if Deku was Meruem's reincarnation? Literally turns out to be Deku and Nezu just best friends, like they're besties at this point. And Deku, of course, would talk to Meruem in his mindscape from time to time. And Meruem would give him some advice, and he would tell him not to go about things in too much drastic way. He tried the same thing, and it just didn't work out the way that he expected it to. You can't just get rid of the humans. You have to change them for the better. And that's exactly what Deku's planning to do by becoming the #1 hero. He doesn't just want to become the #1 hero of Japan. He wants to become the hero of the world. Not somebody who saves petty crimes or banks, but he wants to be the one who's known for saving the world. Not just some robberies or, some villains destroying the city. He wants to be the one who people look at and they're like, it's him, like he saved us all, like sort of figure type God, I guess you could say. That is basically how the 10-month training would, or not even training, because this version of Deku like literally doesn't even train at all. Not because he doesn't even need to train anyway. So that's pretty much how that happens. And now this one we will be covering the entrance exams. Now at this point, Deku was kind of only going to the entrance exams as a little bit of a formality. He only goes in because, well, it's not like he's just gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm in already, even though he could be, because Nezu offered him that. He literally just said, yeah, I could just throw you in there. But Deku was like, there's no real need. I could just take the exam as a formality and just, kind of show that I'm here in a way that All Might would say. Because at this point, All Might has been hanging out with Deku a couple of times, and, they've definitely done a little bit of sparring. Oh wait, no, they haven't done any of that since All Might, as I said, recovering. He would have barely became good about a week prior to the UA stuff, and around that time, All Might was busy, so he had no real time to hang out with Deku or spar with him at all. So Deku just spent most of the time meditating, as I had already said. Now, This is when Deku would basically just be at home as he puts on a pretty crispy outfit. Deku would literally put on like a white shirt, it'd be pretty fitted. It shows off the muscle definition quite well. He's wearing some green cargo pants, some pretty dope ones at that. Like, they're not ugly, like they're drippy ones, right? Like they're fitted perfectly and they don't have like pockets all over the place. They're like really fashionable ones, right? And of course, he's wearing some forces just because, come on now, like he needs the forces. Come on, he look drippy. He look drippy. Anyways, that being said, Deku would basically just be walking and he'd kind of be having like just some headphones on. He'd be wearing some earpods, and he's basically just walking in. This is when Deku would look up and he would immediately see somebody standing in front of him. It would be none other than Bakugo's. He's giving him a bit of a death stare and he'd say, "Hey, Deku, you got some nerve showing your face around here, you quirkless wannabe." As Deku would immediately just walk past Bakugo, Bakugo would grab Deku by the shoulder and spin him around. As before he can even throw an explosion at Deku, Deku would just release his aura or his nen, and immediately Bakugo would just cower in fear as he would feel the presence of a literal god before him. He would immediately just let go of Deku and just fall onto his ass as immediately Bakugo's just like, and Deku would just keep walking. So at this point, the Deku was basically just listening to his jams as, our boy Deku's, he's vibing to some music. He would proceed to basically start walking, as this is when Deku would see somebody tripping and about to fall. Deku would immediately go up to them as he'd grab them, and this would be none other than Uraraka. He'd grab Uraraka and say, "Hey, you should be careful." As Uraraka would basically try to say something to Deku, but, he would kind of just walk away and say that, she should concentrate on the exam. Uraraka would say, "Right," and she would continue to go inside. This is when Deku would go inside and take the entrance exams, as he would get a perfect score on everything, not just the written portion, but the combat and like the teamwork portion that they had to do on, the original version of My Hero Academia. He pretty much takes the exam and he ends up meeting people like Momo Yaoyorozu and Shoto Todoroki. And that's pretty much how things are playing out for Deku in this version of events. Now, from this point, we are going to be skipping on over to the day of first day of UA, as there's not really any content to cover if I don't just skip over here. So yeah, Deku would proceed to put on his school uniform, and this is when he would basically go to school a lot earlier than anybody else. He'd be there about 2 hours early, as Nezu told him and invited him to pull up. And at this point, Deku's parents know that Deku has like a pretty cool relationship with Nezu. At this point, they'd both be thinking that, yeah, their son is set. Like, he's literally best friends with the principal of the school. He's gonna graduate perfect. As Deku just goes off and he would say bye to his mother Inko, as she basically gives him a big hug and tells him how proud she is of her son. I mean, he's going to the best hero school in all of Japan and he's quirkless. Little does Big Mama Inko know that, our boy Deku, he not quirkless. And also, she still gets chubby just because, come on, Mama Inko, like, come on. She got to be a little chub. She has to have a little some on her. Anyways, this is when Deku would go over to Nezu's office and they would basically just play some shogi and drink some tea, doing what they usually do. Afterwards, Deku would suggest to Nezu if they can go to the weight room that, the school has, and Deku would go in there as he would put about 2,000 tons on each side of the bar, and the bar would be literal titanium, so it can hold up the weight pretty well. Deku would start bench pressing that as if it's nothing, and Nezu would just be like, "Ah, yes, the bench press. It's pretty good for building muscle, isn't it?" As he'd basically go up there and grab like a tiny little barbell and he'd start showing Deku the motion that he does, to which Deku would show him how to do it properly, and Nezu would be like, "Huh, thank you, Midoriya." After this point, Deku would basically just continue talking with Nezu, and they'd be talking about the students who are coming in. Nezu would begin to talk about the people, and Deku would give a little bit of a warning for a certain student. This person is of course Bakugo, and Nezu would say, "I'll keep a good watch on him. If he does anything to showing out of the ordinary, we'll kick him out." And Deku would look at Nezu as he says, "Don't you think that's counterintuitive?" Nezu would look at Deku, and Deku would continue to tell Nezu that instead of just trying to kick him out to get rid of the problem, why not fix it themselves? They're the greatest hero school of all Japan for a reason. Instead of kicking people out who are doing bad, they should try to fix them. And Nezu would hear out Deku and be like, "You're right. Never saw it that way." He would say, "Alright, Good to know. As he would say, "Oh my, look at the time. Deku, you must be going out to class now." And at this point, it's around the time that Deku would end up walking into class in the original, so Deku would do just that. And this is when Deku would walk into the class as he would see Bakugo and Ida arguing. Deku would get a weird stare from Bakugo of sort of fear and anger, and Deku would just go over there and sit by the back next to Todoroki. It's at this moment that Todoroki would turn to Deku and ask him, he'd be like, "Hey." As Deku would look at him, he'd be like, "Hey, what's up?" Todoroki would look at Deku as he would say, "I saw what you did in the, the entrance recommendation exams." As Deku would say, "Yeah, it's pretty easy." Todoroki would look at him as he would ask him what his quirk is. Deku, right before he even got the chance to say he was quirkless, Uraraka would come in and be like, "Oh my god, you're the kid from who I saw earlier." As she would thank Deku for saving him, and she'd say, "Oh my god, your eyes, I love your eyes." She'd look towards Deku and start complimenting him a little bit as Deku would say thanks, and he would continue to try to talk with Todoroki, but before he gets the chance, our boy Aizawa would wake up and he would continue to tell everybody to throw those on and meet him outside. Uraraka would of course be like, "But what about the orientations?" And Aizawa would look at her as he would say, "We're heroes. We don't have time to waste on some orientations or for people to tell you how great you are. You don't really need to be told how great you are. Just do it because you have to." As Uraraka would be like, yeah, right. And they'd all basically proceed to go get changed. It's at this point that all of them are basically just vibing. And when Deku takes off his shirt and everybody's kind of just minding their own business, Kirishima would say, "Dude, you're ripped. What do you even do?" As he'd basically pick up Deku's shirt as he just put it on, and Deku would get like a little red in his face. He'd be like, "What are you doing?" And Kirishima would feel on his abs as he's like, "Dude, you need to show me how to get as ripped as you." As Deku would say, "I don't see why not. How about after class?" Kirishima would say that he could definitely do that. As Deku and Kirishima would look at each other, Deku would wonder why he reacted that way, but he'd kind of just put it to the back of his head. And it's after this point that people like the class would just be looking at Deku. Mineta ain't even focused on the girls. He's focused on Deku. No homo. He's wearing socks. But come on now, like Deku is looking like a Greek god and he wants a piece of that. Like, anyways, this is when Deku and everybody else would basically go outside, and reminiscent to the scene of One Punch Man taking the hero exam and stuff like that in the One Punch Man thing, this is literally how the entrance exams would go for Deku. He would continue to do literally almost the same thing that Saitama did when he just destroyed everything and like destroyed the long jump, the ball throw, all that stuff. Yeah, Deku would just obliterate the ball throw. He'd throw that thing straight into orbit. And in terms of the speed, like, dude, he'd literally get an even better score than Ida. He'd break All Might's score by like 10 times, barely trying. I mean, he's like putting most of his effort into it. Not maximum effort, but most of his effort, right? I can't make him that broken. I mean, I know Meruem's goated and all, but I can't do Meruem this much, I can't praise him this much, Anyways, that being said, as I said, Deku would break every record that there's ever been set in UA, and everybody would just be completely shocked. It's legit a scene, reminiscent of One Punch Man. And after this, Deku would basically just be surrounded by everybody, as they're all just like, "Dude, what is your quirk?" Aizawa would look at all of them and he would say he's quirkless, as his eyes would be shining red, and he would have been trying to use his quirk on Deku, but he couldn't erase a thing. Not on any single one of the tests he was able to erase any quirk. And Deku would then be like, "Yeah, I'm quirkless." Bakugo would say, "There's no way you're quirkless," as he'd say, "No quirkless person could muster up an aura that powerful. You must have something." As Deku would basically tell him that no, he doesn't have a quirk. Bakugo would be like, "Whatever, Deku," and he'd basically proceed to go off. It's at this point that Deku would ask Kirishima if he's ready, and they would both basically get dressed as they would get their bags and they'd go to the UA gym, to which Nezu would actually end up tagging along, and Kirishima, Nezu, and Deku would literally just be working out in the weight room. Even Nezu was lifting weights. It was the funniest thing ever. Like, imagine Nezu lifting weights. Like, that's just, it's beautiful. It's very gorgeous, right? It's very good. Anyways, after that, Deku would proceed to go home, and about, let's say, 2 to 3 days would go by, To which at this point, we would be on the day of the heroes versus villains. At this point, everybody would basically just have gotten to know each other a little bit better, seeing as it's been about 4 days since then. And this is when, everybody would just be kind of, just as I said, getting to know each other a little bit, and they'd all just kind of be vibing with each other. Nobody really has any problems with each other. They're all just straight chilling. They're all some pretty good friends. And Deku would just be in class as All Might would burst in through the door saying, "I am here!" As immediately Deku would just kind of be sitting there, like kind of be just looking at All Might, and he'd be like, "Hey, All Might," as everybody in the class would have just been dumbstruck, like their jaws would have dropped, and they would have been like, "All Might," as Deku just literally sat there, and they're like, "Dude, it's All Might. Why are you not freaking out?" Deku would literally look at everybody else, and he'd be like, "What? I'm like All Might. I'm cool with them." And All Might would walk up to Deku as he'd basically lean over and whisper in his ear, "The surgery was a success. I'm perfectly recovered, by the way. So if you want, after class, we can maybe spar." And Deku would smile a little bit as he would think that that's perfect news. As at this point, All Might would continue to do his little speech about telling everybody that the clothes make the pros, and just kind of, it's really just All Might being All Might, I guess. Like, that's really all I can say. Like, there's no real other way to summarize it. And yeah. And to this point that, well, he basically gets told that, they're all going to need to go get changed. As Deku's hero outfit would be, I guess it could be Meruem's outfit. Does Meruem, here, let me look it up. Also, apologies for the keyboard sound. I probably just defiled your, probably just destroyed your ears. Meruem's outfit, should I get? I mean, I might as well. Come on, like there's really no reason for Deku not to get. Yeah, Deku has Meruem's outfit, right? And yeah, that's basically how Deku walks out. Everybody would see Deku, and the girls would see Deku's abs as, oh god, waterfalls are going all over the place. Like if like I'm pretty sure little drops of water would just fall into the ground and No, but seriously though, everybody would be looking at Deku as the man is ripped. Kirishima would slap Deku on his back, and Deku would stare at him with like a confused look as he'd say, "Yup, my man Deku, and someday I'm gonna be just as ripped as him." As he'd basically look towards Kirishima, give him a little bit of a nod, and it's at this point that everybody would be told who they're going to be going up against. After Deku was told that he was going to be fighting against Bakugo and Ida, it's immediately when Deku and like that matchup gets called that Deku would literally just say, "Hey, no." As All Might would say, "What do you mean no, Deku?" As he doesn't say Deku, but he says young Midoriya. As immediately Deku would just say, "I don't want to fight Bakugo. That'd be too easy, All Might. You know it as well. Bakugo isn't even half to my level." As Bakugo would give Deku a death stare, Deku would say that would be way too easy, and Bakugo himself knows it. As he would stare down at Bakugo and say, "Right." As Bakugo would literally give Deku, look down at the ground because he's just terrified of Deku, and he'd say, "Right." And it's at this point that Ida would say, "There is no way you're just going to let him choose his things. This is UA, and you're speaking to All Might. How about a little bit of respect?" As he'd go up to Deku and smack him in his face with his hand. Immediately, Deku would grab Ida's wrist, and before he can do anything, Baku would just say, "How about you just get out of there, Ida?" As Ida would literally walk away and get pushed away by Bakugo himself, because he knows what was going to happen next. That man was about to get his whole wrist broken. There was no ifs, ands, or buts to it. He was just going to get his wrist completely shattered. It's at this point that All Might would look at Deku and ask, "What do you suggest we do then? I mean, there's nobody else for you to fight." As Deku would look at All Might and say, "There isn't?" He'd say, "I'm pretty sure there is. He's standing right in front of me." All Might would look at Deku and he'd give him a little bit of a grin as Deku would do the same back, and immediately All Might would say, "Well, if that's what you want to do." He'd basically throw a little bit of a facade telling the students that, everything will be okay. And it's at this point that he would basically say that their match will be at the end. As everybody else would have their matches, one team would be like a 3-on-3, the team that Bakugo was basically got out of. And after all the matches would happen, we would then leave off with okay, excuse me for that, but we then go to Deku versus All Might. Now, this one, all of the students would basically surround them all, and they would go over to some field. As, Deku would basically just crack his neck and start popping some bones, as he'd just be like, You know, like doing that. As yes, I just popped my knuckles. Kind of hurt. But anyways, Deku would do just that, crack his neck, and he'd start stretching a little bit. He'd tell All Might, he'd hold out his hand, and he'd be pointing out like he'd have four fingers in the air, as Deku's basically trying to tell All Might that he's only going to use 40% of his power. As immediately All Might would smile, knowing that yeah, he's not going to get done dirty too bad in front of the students. And before anything can happen, Deku and All Might would blitz at each other. They would start punching at each other. All Might would start landing blow after blow at Deku, and Deku would be tanking all of them, as he would smile and say that this is amazing. All Might definitely got, you know, his money's worth with what that surgery he got on himself. All Might would be smiling, and Deku would be having a blast. He'd be having a pretty good time. Deku would, you know, lower himself to about 20% to make the fight even more fair. And this is when Deku would then throw a punch so powerful it could destroy mountains. He would throw it right at the side of All Might right before anything else could happen. And he would end up like literally the clouds, all of them from like a 100-mile radius would just all disappear. They'd all disperse. The sky would be clear, like literally clear, and All Might, like his hair would have fallen down, like the little spikes that he has up, they fell down, and he'd look at Deku as he was just dumbstruck, like completely dumbstruck. Deku would look towards All Might as he would tap his face and be like, I win. As All Might would then say, yeah, we're gonna end it off here, kids. Everybody would look at Deku and people would just be like, this kid is insane. Dude, how are you this powerful? People would just start surrounding Deku, and Deku would just start getting applauded by everybody. It's at this point that Deku would basically just end up saying that it wasn't that big of a deal, and you know, the day would end. After this, people would basically go home and they'd start, you know, posting stuff on their social medias talking about how there's somebody even more powerful than Deku. They'd post the emoji that like covering his mouth, the one that goes shh, you know, that one. And you know, it just, one of the tweets would actually go viral. It would actually be, let's see, Kirishima's tweet, right? Kirishima's tweet would end up going viral, and people would start questioning, what do they mean by that? Is there somebody at UA that's like rivaling All Might or something? Like, is the next symbol of peace ready? And you know, it would just spark up a giant conversation. News stations would talk about it, and it would just be going around worldwide. This is when we're kind of just going to skip on over to the day of the USJ, seeing as there's not going to be any more real content to cover in terms of any real stuff that's going to be happening from here on out, just due to the fact that, well, I mean, all that really happens is Deku hangs out with Nezu, he works out with Kirishima, but I already talked about that a little bit, so, you know, it'd basically just be a repeat. So instead, I'm just going to, you know, skip on over to the day of the USJ. All of the students would basically be in class, and they would be asking Deku just how he did what he had done. Deku would tell them that it was no real big deal, and that, you know, he just, you know, he went all out. He lied to them all purposefully, just because of course he doesn't want to tell people. And this would actually lead to Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and like the League of Villains just questioning whether they should or shouldn't attack, because from what they're hearing, there's a student that's even more powerful than All Might, and they're questioning whether they should or shouldn't attack. This is when the UA traitor would actually give some intel to the League of Villains, and they would tell them that the student was far more powerful than All Might. It seems as if he was even holding back. And this is basically when they would all, I was gonna leave it off there, but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna keep it going just a little longer. 22 minutes long, come on, I gotta give y'all more content than that, come on. Anyways, this is when they would all go inside, and instead of having just the boring, like the attack on the USJ, nothing would happen. See, the villains aren't quite prepared for this. All they have is normal no moves, and after being told that the student was even more powerful than All Might, and that it seems as if All Might isn't even declining at all, they immediately just pulled out of that, because All For One gave Shigaraki the orders not to do it. If it was on Shigaraki's behalf, he definitely would have done that, just because Shigaraki at this point isn't smart. And, you know, this would lead into them trying to create even more powerful Nomus. So the high-end Nomus, they'd start getting created even earlier on than in the original canon. And this is when 13 would basically look at all of the students. As she would say, all right, guys, today's speech is going to consist of, you know, just some normal stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the trip here, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, seeing as 13 is breaking the fourth wall. She would continue to look at you guys and be like, yeah, Yeah, I'm talking to you guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you guys go down below and hit that like button, share the video with a friend, and comment down below what you thought of the video. Let me know who Deku should be shipped with, whether he should or shouldn't. I'm leaning more towards he shouldn't, but you know, we're not sure. And I think this can change. It's at this point that Nezu would pop up like right at the screen, just be like, and make sure you drink all of your tea and keep your fur soft. Make sure you know, stay tuned for the next part, subscribe to his other's channel, and that is all the content we have for today. This is when I would basically walk up to Nezu and be like, hey, dude, let me do my outro. And I would then pop in as I'm just like, yo, yeah, do what they just said. Hope you guys liked the ending of this video. It has been your boy Zether. I love each and every single one of you guys. Share the video with a friend. Do me that favor. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.